Hello, YouTube, and thank you for joining me today on Maundy Thursday. That's right, I said Maundy Thursday. Now you say, didn't you say Mondo Thursday in the introductory video for this? I said, yep, I sure did. In fact, my wife was the one that brought it to my attention. Shelley said, yeah, I watched your drunk theology channel, and she said, you said Mondo Thursday. I said, yeah. She says, are you sure about that? I said, I don't know. And I just had a senior moment. I realized, oh, it's Maundy. Why did I keep saying Mondo? But, hey, chalk it up to being on the planet 59 years, But today is Maundy Thursday. And so that is what is called in many countries. In the United States, I believe some call it Holy Thursday. I believe in the Philippines it's called Jueves Santos, which is similar to what it's called in Mexico, which is Holy Thursday. And I hope that pronunciation was right. That's just a little shout out to my little grandson, Neo, who's of Filipino heritage. Cute little guy. Anyway, I have 5 grandchildren, by the way, but that's all irrelevant, right? They're all precious. So anyway, let me just say that today is Maundy Thursday. You say, so what is Maundy? Well, Maundy, as it's translated from the Latin, is from the Latin word mandatum, which means commandment. So it is Commandment Thursday, and it takes place during Holy Week. And it's based on a new commandment that Jesus gave to his disciples on the night of the Passover. And let me paint a little bit of a picture for you before we get into that. Here it's Passover, the beginning of Passover. Just 2 days before that, we have the woman that came to Jesus and washed his feet, poured the oil, the fragrant perfume that was very expensive from the alabaster box. And Judas, of course, was upset by this because he was the treasurer. He said, hey, this is a waste. You should have just donated it. We could have sold it, gave the money to the poor. Of course, the Apostle John in the Gospel of John says, it wasn't because he cared about the poor. Judas had a habit of reaching into the little treasury box and taking some for himself. So he says that's the reason he was upset. But he was upset enough that he went to the Pharisees and the leaders to arrange a meeting between Jesus and the Pharisees. Essentially, he was betraying him, and they paid him 30 pieces of silver. So here they come, they celebrate the Passover. Jesus at the end of the meal goes and sits down, and after having washed his disciples' feet as a object lesson to them, was trying to convey to them, the servant is not greater than his master. And if I'm your master, if I'm your teacher, if I'm your leader, if I'm your Lord, and I wash your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. So he gives them this lesson before the Passover meal. After the Passover meal, he goes and he reclines, and he's troubled. And they could see it, and he said, someone is going to betray me. And then, the disciples, they begin to argue with one another, say, who is it? Who's going to do this? And Jesus then doesn't say anything. And John leans over and says, who is it? And he says, it's the one who's going to dip bread at the same time with me in this little dip that they had. It was a salt water vinegar dip. And Judas, of course, dipped at the same time. And Jesus looked at him and said, what you have to do, go and do. No one knew what it was, but they all started arguing, wondering, what's he doing? And all of a sudden they got into this dispute, according to the book of Luke, where who is the greatest? Well, which one of us is going to be, the head here? Who's going to, when Jesus takes over? Because they're thinking Jesus is going to take over, and they haven't got a clue yet, even though he's already told them, hey, I'm going to be crucified. They didn't quite get it. I can imagine that's hard to believe. That's hard to understand, because you have this man that's performing miracles and has the admiration of the people and is poised to take over, and they look and they don't quite understand. They're arguing, okay, who's greatest, and Jesus just looks at them, and they're arguing like, hey, and what was up with Judas? Where's he going? Who does he think he is? Because they all know he takes money from the box. They're not ignorant to that fact. Jesus is not ignorant to that fact. And so they're not quite sure, and there's this emotional upheaval that's beginning to come to surface, and Jesus sits down and he says, listen, I've got some things to say to you. And so this is from the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verse 31. It says, now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. Beginning at verse 31. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I'm with you. You will seek me, and just as I've said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, also love one another. By this will all people know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. See, if anything else, Jesus is practical. If nothing else, Jesus is practical. He sees that they're emotionally charged. He sees that they're striving in their humanity to see who's going to be number one in the pecking order. And he sees that they're angry at Judas. And he knows that they're really going to be angry at him once they know he betrayed him. And he also knows, and he has not yet to reveal to them, but he will in a little while, he knows that Peter's going to deny him 3 times. He also knows that the rest of them are going to run away when the soldiers, from the Sanhedrin come and take him. And he knows, just because of the way human nature is, that they're going to try to blame each other. They're going to try to find fault with one another. Say, you betrayed him. Judas betrayed him. And you, Peter, you denied him. You have, and he says, I have to stop this right now. And he tells them, this is a new commandment. And I'm not telling it to the world. I'm not telling it to those who don't follow me. I'm giving it to those who are my disciples. If you're going to be my disciple, you've got to love each other. You've got to watch out for one another. You got to do right for each other. And the world will see that, and they will know that you are my disciples. See, anytime there's havoc and pandemonium, people can turn on each other. What we're going through right now in this nation, the confusion, the questions, wondering if it's real or not real. Is it as bad as they said it was, or is it not as bad? What seems to be fabrication, it brings us to a place of not trusting one another. And I have noticed it as I've gone about my business. It's the social distancing. And Shelley, she happens to work for a large retail outfit that everyone goes to. Everyone loves their toilet paper. And the arguments and the fights and the distrusts that she sees every day. And she has to be a calming spirit. She has to be a loving spirit. And she's put to the test. Bless her heart. The more gracious and loving person you will never meet. More genuine and real. But that's the love of Jesus. And Jesus is saying, hey, if you're going to be my disciple, you've got to love each other. That's what's going to bring you through. The love of God will bring you through the hard times that are ahead. He's letting his disciples know that, and I believe that's the word he's giving out to us. We are in a time where the church can shine. Oh yeah, we're not having great fanfare Easter services. We're not having great Good Friday services. We're not having, ecstatic times of worship. No sunrise services. But whom we come in contact with, we can demonstrate the love of Jesus because we're his disciples. We belong to him. And if you will keep that in mind, especially when you know others that are around you that maybe are co-workers, acquaintances that claim to be Christian or are Christians. I don't want to use that word claim, but profess to know Christ and are acting and behaving in a way that is unseemly. During this time of crisis, have an extra measure of grace. Have an extra measure of grace. Because it is that love that will bring us through. So, the new commandment, Maundy Thursday, it fits in so well with the first two challenges. But let us love each other, and the church will shine and show people the way to know God, the way to salvation. So that's my message to you today, friends. Maundy Thursday, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. I can go into that, but don't want to take up all of your time. But think about the way he's loved you. And love each other in that same way. Have a wonderful Easter celebration, Resurrection Day celebration. And for those of you that are like myself, that you practice the feast of the Lord, of the Passover, and have a Seder meal. Shalom. And God bless you all.